They say 50 is the age when women finally come into their own. That we stop caring what the world thinks and start living for ourselves. But no one talks about how lonely that freedom can feel when you're living with a man who no longer sees you. My name is Claire. I live in a quiet suburb outside the city, in a house that still smells faintly of vanilla and cinnamon from the cakes I bake to order. My days are spent in flower-dusted aprons, piping roses onto red velvet hearts for anniversaries I'm not invited to anymore. And my nights? They're filled with the flickering light of the television my husband hogs, slouched in his recliner with a beer balanced on his stomach like a crown. We've been married for 30 years. My husband is 60 now, retired early, though retired is a generous way of saying he stopped showing up for our life. He prefers the hum of football commentary to the sound of my voice. Our bed, once warm and tangled with laughter and whispered dreams, has become a cold obligation, a routine. We used to share everything. Travel plans, Sunday crossword puzzles, jokes only we understood. But now, the only thing we share is a mattress, and even that feels like borrowed space. I haven't spoken these thoughts aloud. Not to anyone. Not even to him. But maybe that's why I'm writing now. Because something happened yesterday that shook me, not just physically but emotionally, to the core. It started with a dull ache. A slow, twisting discomfort low in my abdomen, like a hand curling tightly around something fragile. I ignored it at first. Pain is nothing new. I've learned to live with quiet discomforts. Marriage, silence, yearning. But by evening, it had grown sharper, more insistent. I couldn't stand upright without wincing. I was folding parchment paper over a batch of warm chocolate cake when it doubled me over. I don't know why I called my son instead of my husband. Maybe because my husband would have waved it off as indigestion and gone back to his beer. But my son, Ethan, he listens. He's 27 now. A gynecologist at a private clinic. Intelligent, confident, and far too handsome for his own good. Women throw themselves at him, and he, in his quiet, clinical way, dodges it all. Focused. Driven. I like to think we're close, Ethan and I. He's my only child, and though I've tried never to smother him, I've always made it clear he can come to me with anything. And in return, he has given me his trust. His attention. I picked up the phone and called. It rang twice. Mom, everything okay? His voice, that calm, steady tone he uses with patience, immediately soothed me. I don't know, I admitted, clutching my stomach. My lower abdomen. It's been hurting all day. I can barely stand. There was a pause. I could hear him frowning through the phone. You're coming to the clinic tomorrow. First thing. I'll see you myself. I hesitated. Are you sure? I mean, wouldn't it be awkward? His laugh was soft. Mom. I'm a professional. And besides, it's better I see you than someone who doesn't care enough to listen properly. You trust me, don't you? I did. Maybe too much. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind spiraled with questions and nerves. I kept picturing the sterile white of his office, the sound of gloved fingers against metal instruments, the quiet click of a closing door. He would see me. All of me. The woman behind the aprons and birthday cakes. The woman his father no longer noticed. My body, once the center of a home, now felt foreign, tired, but still alive beneath the surface. Still curious. Still needing to be seen. I stood in the mirror before bed, lifting my nightgown just slightly, pressing my fingers gently to the sore spot. The pain was real, but it wasn't just that. It was everything. A swelling knot of grief and desire, of years spent unseen. And tomorrow, I would step into a room where my son, my Ethan, would see me not as a mother, but as a patient. Vulnerable. Exposed. I don't know what scares me more, the diagnosis or the questions it might awaken in both of us. I barely slept. By morning, my limbs felt heavy and my thoughts scattered. I moved through my kitchen like a ghost, rinsing a mug I didn't drink from, wiping counters that were already clean. The ache in my stomach had dulled but not disappeared. It pulsed gently, like a reminder of what waited for me today. The city was still waking up when I arrived at Ethan's clinic. A sleek building of glass and steel tucked between a bank and a yoga studio. The receptionist gave me a polite, distracted smile, her fingers clicking rapidly across her keyboard. When she asked for my name, I hesitated before answering. "Claire," I said. "Claire Henderson. I'm here to see Dr. Henderson." She glanced up, her expression unreadable, maybe a flicker of curiosity in her eyes.
"Right.
"He told us to expect you. You can head back to exam room 3. The hallway felt too quiet, the overhead lights humming faintly as I walked. My heels echoed off the polished floor. I passed rooms with doors slightly ajar, white coats, muffled voices, a man coughing behind a curtain. Then I saw him. Ethan. He was standing just outside the room, flipping through a chart, but his eyes lifted the moment I approached. His face softened. "Hey, Mom," he said, stepping aside so I could enter first. "Come in. You okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure. "You know, I'm not used to seeing you like this. In doctor mode." He gave a gentle smile. "Well, I'll try not to intimidate you. Though, I hear I'm very professional." Inside, the exam room was spotless.
"Cool."
Sterile. The paper on the exam table crinkled as I perched at the edge of it. Ethan pulled up a rolling stool and sat, glancing at me with concern but keeping his tone measured. "Tell me everything from the beginning. Where exactly is the pain?" I described it slowly. The dull pressure. The moments when it turned sharp. He listened with his whole body, not just his ears, leaning forward slightly, brows drawn together, nodding as he took notes. "Any other symptoms? Bloating? Spotting?" "No," I said quietly. "Just the pain. I thought it was nothing. I wouldn't have even come if it weren't for you." He looked up. "I'm glad you did." His voice was calm, but his eyes told me more. He was watching me the way he did when he was young, when I had a fever or cried in the kitchen once when I thought no one saw. But this was different. He wasn't just concerned.
He was focused.
"Okay," he said, standing. "I'll do a quick pelvic exam, just to rule things out." My throat went dry. I nodded, trying to mask the sudden flutter in my chest.
"Right."
"Of course. I'll step out so you can undress. Gown's there," he said gently, motioning toward the folded fabric on the counter. "Take your time. Knock when you're ready." He left, and for a moment, I just stood there staring at the gown. My fingers trembled slightly as I removed my clothes and draped the gown over my shoulders. It was paper-thin, barely opaque. I lay back on the table, the sound of the paper beneath me deafening in the stillness. I stared at the ceiling tiles, breathed in,
out.
Then I knocked. Ethan returned a second later, his expression unreadable now. "Professional. I'm going to raise the table," he said, pressing a pedal at his feet. "Just breathe. Let me know if you're uncomfortable at any point." I nodded, watching the ceiling as it inched farther away. I had given birth to this man, held his hand through fevers and heartbreaks. And now here we were, separated by time, by roles, by something unspoken pressing itself into the room like heat. His gloved hands moved with care, but I felt everything more than I should have, not just the physical sensation but the presence of him. He didn't speak for several long moments. Just silence and breath. "Everything feels normal so far," he finally said, his voice lower now. "I'm checking for any abnormalities, any inflammation." I closed my eyes, trying to focus on the ceiling. But I could feel it, a shift in the air, a current between us that neither of us wanted to name. I could hear the change in his breath. Slower, more deliberate. And when his hand brushed the inside of my thigh, professional, necessary, I flinched. "Sorry," he said immediately, pulling back. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I whispered, not meeting his eyes. "It's just this is strange. That's all." He stood slowly, stepping away, snapping off his gloves with practiced ease. "Mom," he started but stopped. I turned my head toward him. There was something in his eyes then. Not pity. Not even concern. It was something deeper.
Raw.
Caught between emotion and impulse. Something neither of us had a word for. "I think we're done," he said quietly, his voice unsteady. I sat up, the paper gown rustling like a secret trying to speak. We were both silent. The tension had become unbearable, not loud, not spoken, but thick and electric. Something had happened in that room. Not physical, but something deeper. A current we couldn't control. I couldn't look at him. Not yet. I dressed quickly once he stepped out again, my hands trembling as I fastened my bra, my blouse, each button feeling like a seal. I was pressing into something sacred. Or forbidden. When I opened the door, he was waiting.
He didn't speak.
Neither did I. We walked down the hallway like two strangers who had seen something in each other that shouldn't have been seen. Something that changed the air between us forever. "I'll call you," he said at the front desk, his voice clipped. "Once the labs are back." I nodded. "Thank you." Our eyes met one last time. And then I left, the automatic doors hissing open, the sunlight outside blinding. I didn't know what scared me more, what might be happening inside my body, or what had already happened inside that room. The sunlight felt strange on my skin. Too bright. Too warm for October. Or maybe I was just imagining that, the way everything else seemed surreal after leaving that exam room. I drove home in silence, the hum of the engine a thin distraction from the memory that kept looping in my mind. Not the exam itself, though that would have been enough, but the moment after. That fleeting second when our eyes met, and something unspoken passed between us. It had no name, but it had weight. When I got home, I left the car running for a moment before I turned the key and sat there, hands still on the wheel. I could hear the ticking of the engine cooling, could feel the tension still tight in my chest. I had walked into that clinic expecting a diagnosis. What I left with was something entirely different. My home felt unfamiliar when I entered. My husband's slippers were still by the door, untouched, even though he hadn't worn them in days. The TV was on in the living room, some rerun of a sports show, though he was nowhere in sight. I didn't call out for him. I went to the kitchen instead, turned on the kettle, and stood at the window while it whistled behind me. Everything felt like it was still moving inside me. The sound of Ethan's voice, the softness in his eyes, the way he had pulled his gloves off with trembling fingers. I told myself I was reading too much into it, that it was just the stress of it all, the awkwardness of being examined by your own son. But that wasn't all of it. There was something else. And I had felt it too. That night, I barely touched my dinner. My husband sat across from me, eating in silence, pausing only to sip from his beer and comment vaguely on a news segment. He didn't notice the way I kept glancing at my phone, or the way my knee bounced beneath the table. He hadn't noticed much of anything in years. I excused myself early, blaming fatigue. In truth, my mind was still back in that exam room, still trying to understand what had changed, and why it wouldn't let me go. I went upstairs, washed my face, brushed my teeth, stared into the mirror longer than usual. I studied the lines around my mouth, the subtle sag of my jaw, the soft fold where my neck met my collarbone. Time had taken its share, but I was still here, still whole, still a woman. At 11:14 p.m., my phone lit up.
Ethan. Hey.
Just wanted to say, I dropped your labs off tonight, so they're processed quickly.
Should hear something by Friday.
You doing okay? I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Thanks for checking in. I'm fine. Just still a little shaken up, I guess. The typing bubble appeared immediately. Yeah, I get that. It was strange for me too. I held my breath. There it was. The first acknowledgement that something had shifted. That I wasn't imagining it. It wasn't just clinical, was it? I hesitated. Then typed.
No.
It wasn't. The bubble vanished. Reappeared. Then disappeared again. I waited. And waited. The phone never buzzed again that night. The next morning, I woke early and walked down to the bakery on Main Street just to get out of the house. I needed air. Needed motion. Something to remind me that life was still moving normally outside the quiet storm unraveling inside me. I bought a cinnamon roll and sat at a sidewalk table under a tree shedding red leaves. I watched strangers pass, young couples holding hands, an old man walking his dog, two teenagers sharing earbuds. Everyone looked like they belonged in their story. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure I belonged in mine. When I returned home, my husband was still asleep on the couch, mouth slightly open, remote in his hand. I walked past him, silent, and found myself standing at the door to the guest room. Ethan's old room.
It was neat now. Sparse.
He hadn't slept here in years, but everything still smelled faintly of him. The cologne he used in college. The books he refused to throw away. A dusty trophy from some junior science fair. I walked in and sat on the edge of his bed. And I remembered the way he used to burst through the door after school, talking a mile a minute. How he'd ask me about the stars, about love, about what made people change. Even then, he saw through things most others didn't. And now he had seen through me. The way no one else had in a long time. On Friday morning, my phone rang just as I stepped out of the shower. I wrapped a towel around myself and answered. Mom? Ethan's voice was quiet. Hi, honey. I got your results. Everything looks normal. Completely normal. Relief washed over me, but it didn't land fully. Because that wasn't the call I was waiting for. Thanks, I said. I appreciate you getting them through quickly. There was a pause. I didn't just call for that, he admitted. I've been thinking about Tuesday. About that moment. I didn't speak. I don't know what it means, he continued. But I felt it. And I think you did too. I swallowed.
My voice was barely there.
I did. The line crackled with silence. Then, quietly, he said, Can we talk?
Just talk.
In person. I nodded before I realized he couldn't see me. Yes. Tonight, he asked. After your husband's asleep? There was no judgment in his voice. No hesitation. Just truth. Yes, I whispered. And suddenly, the ache in my stomach wasn't pain. It was something else entirely. The house was silent. It always was by this hour. My husband had fallen asleep in the recliner, remote still in hand, the TV casting soft flickers of blue across his face. I didn't wake him. I didn't cover him with a blanket. I just stood there for a moment, watching the way he barely stirred anymore, and wondered how long we'd been drifting in this quiet goodbye. Upstairs, I changed into something simple, soft cotton pants and a loose sweater, and sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the clock. 11:47 p.m. The message came just as I was about to lose my nerve. I'm outside. Lights are off. Just knock when you're ready. My breath caught in my throat. My heart began to drum in that deep, low rhythm that lives in the chest when you're about to step into something irreversible. I moved down the stairs like a shadow, silent, barefoot. The air felt thick with something unspeakable. I opened the front door slowly, the night spilling in around me. Cool, still, private. Ethan was sitting in his car at the curb, engine off. He looked up as I stepped outside. No smile, just his eyes locking onto mine. I didn't say a word. I opened the passenger door and slid inside. The interior smelled like him, clean, subtle cologne and coffee. The windows were slightly fogged. It felt like stepping into a sealed moment, detached from everything else in the world. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, his voice, low, roughened by restraint. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I turned toward him, slowly. Me either. He looked down at his hands on the steering wheel, then at me. Really at me. I don't know what that makes me, he said. But I know what I felt in that room. And I saw it in your face too. I nodded once, barely. It's not about labels, I whispered. It's about something that's been living underneath everything else. Quiet, but real. He let out a breath. I keep remembering how you looked on the table. Not because of the exam, but because you looked vulnerable.
And strong.
And alone. My eyes stung. I've felt alone for years, I said, the words trembling on my tongue. Even in a house full of routine. No one has looked at me like I'm still here. Not until you.
His hand moved then. Slowly.
Tentatively. He reached across the console and brushed the back of his fingers along the edge of my jaw. I froze, but not out of fear. It was reverence, shock, relief. I shouldn't, he murmured, but didn't pull away. My breath caught as I leaned into the touch, just barely. His fingers shifted, cupping my cheek now, thumb tracing the line under my eye as if memorizing the face of someone he thought he already knew. I kept trying to tell myself it was nothing, he said, voice breaking slightly. That it was just the situation. Just concern. But it wasn't, I said. And we both know that. We sat there like that, his hand on my face, my chest rising and falling, our eyes locked. The car around us had disappeared. The street was silent. The world had narrowed to just that small space between our mouths. His thumb moved to my lips. My hand lifted instinctively, fingers trembling as I placed them over his, holding him there. I feel like I've been waiting years just to be touched like this, I whispered. His brow furrowed, emotion storming behind his expression. He leaned in slowly, so slowly, and rested his forehead against mine. I don't want to hurt you, he breathed, or make this worse. But I can't lie to you. Not about this. You're not, I said. You're the only one who hasn't. The quiet between us pulsed with tension, breath and skin, confession and restraint. And then his other hand reached up, settling lightly on my waist, fingers barely resting through the fabric of my sweater. It wasn't possessive. It was grounding. I could feel his heart beating through the closeness of him. The moment stretched, swelled. We were one breath away, one tilt, one decision. And then I pulled back, just enough to look into his eyes. I can't do this here, I said, voice thick with meaning. Not in a car, not in the dark, not like this. He nodded slowly, though I could see the storm still trembling in him. In both of us. I know, he said. But can I see you tomorrow? Just to talk. Just us. I nodded. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt seen. As I stepped out of the car, I didn't look back. But I felt his eyes follow me all the way to the door.